Hey guys, Miss Parnell here, going over the first note sheet from this unit, political parties. Now, I know you did this PowerPoint and the note sheet with Miss Fadley, so if you want to get your note sheet out and just kind of follow along, hopefully it just kind of helps to explain everything so that you are good to go on Unit 3. If for some reason you were absent or didn't get these notes, you can take them right now. You can go on the website. There's a Google Doc and a Word doc. You can type it on there. If it's a Google Doc, make sure you go up to File and hit Make a Copy. It'll put it in your Google Drive, and then you can type on it. You can take these notes on a piece of notebook paper, or you can simply just type them up in a Google Doc, however you want to take the notes if you don't have them. But you probably already have them. All right, so political parties, you got your definition up first. It's a group of people with common interests who organize to win elections and operate in government. So party just means like a group of people, and these are a group of people who think the same about politics, basically. So the first two political parties, you didn't have to actually write this down when she was telling you about it, were the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. Now, if you go back to Unit 1, when Miss Fadley was teaching you remember back when we were talking about ratifying the Constitution? And remember, we got right down to the end. We did all those compromises, the Great Compromise, the 3/5 compromise with slavery, blah, 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 blah. We get all these compromises. You're right down to the end, and you think the Constitution's going to get signed, and it doesn't. And remember, it was the anti-federalists who were like kind of throwing up a stink about it. And it was the people in the South. It was the farmers and stuff. And they were like, whoa, this new constitution, this president sounds like a king. You don't have any rights. How do I know you're not going to like run all over me? And remember, the Federalists had to end up writing the Bill of Rights, pretty much the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, which protected all our rights and basically proved like, we're not going to be like a king. You're going to be free and have, democracy and freedom and stuff. And remember, they had to do that. Then the anti-federalists read it and were like, all right, sounds good, signed it, and we had a constitution. Well, this is the same political parties from that time period. So this is the same Federalist. This is the anti-federalist. They just changed their name to the Democratic Republicans. So the Federalists want a big, strong federal government. They were the people that came up with the Constitution. They wanted a president, all this stuff with Congress, putting more power into the federal government. The Democratic Republicans, they're like the anti-federalists. They want it to be smaller. They want more power at the state and local level. They don't want the big guy telling them what to do. They think that's too kind of out of control and out of their hands. They want more power here with us, states, local, me, the people. Like, don't get in my business too much. So the Federalists are going to be like today's Democrats, and the anti-federalists are pretty much going to be like today's Republican. So Alexander Hamilton and John Adams were Federalists. Thomas Jefferson and James Madison were Democratic Republicans. So you've heard of all those people. Alexander Hamilton, is on the, $10 bill? $10 bill? Why am I all of a sudden $10 bill? See, this is what happens when I start filming myself. I get to second guess myself. John Adams, second president of the United States. Hamilton, that's the guy that musical Hamilton's made after. That's him right there. Don't worry, in the next PowerPoint, I'll tell you what ends up happening to him and why he's the musical. All right, and then you got Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. Thomas Jefferson, as you know, is the $20 bill. He's, our third president. And then James Madison, he's the guy who actually wrote the Constitution. So 4 very famous people starting this out. If you're sitting here wondering, well, what was George Washington? He actually refused to pick a political party. He did not want to be divisive. He wanted to be everyone's president, not just this half. And so when he got done being in office, you'll learn about this more in American history, he does this big speech on his last day. It's called George Washington's Farewell Address. Pretty famous speech in American history. If you haven't studied it yet, you will. And he says, do not pick a political party. It will divide America. It's not going to end well. And everybody, I guess, is in the crowd like, okay. Because the minute he leaves office, guy number 2 steps up and could not be more political. John Adams couldn't have been more divisive. And then number 3 steps up, Thomas Jefferson right here. And then when I tell you a story in another PowerPoint about Jefferson and Hamilton and how divisive it was, somebody gets killed over this. Yeah, cliffhanger. You got to wait to see. That's how divisive they are. So you think we're divisive today? We are. Don't get me wrong. People either love Trump or they hate Trump. There is nobody hardly in between, right? People either loved Hillary Clinton or they hate Hillary Clinton. There's no gray in the middle. But back then, it was just as divisive, and even more so because we're going to see somebody murder someone from the other party. So anyways, George Washington warned us against it. We did not listen. We made 2 political parties, and here we are today. So the current ones today are the Democrats and the Republicans. So the Democrats were formed in 1828 in support of Andrew Jackson, the president, the guy running for president at the time, and they really kind of made their stronghold as the common person. Republicans were formed in 1854 with Abraham Lincoln. Now, this is not the year he wins presidency. This when he's running, he's like a senator, and then he wins presidency 6 years later in 1860. And the Republicans were formed in opposition to slavery, which is pretty interesting. And they're known as the Grand Old Party. Now, look at this real fast. You didn't have to write this down. Around the turn of the 20th century, around the 1900s, the parties flip-flopped. I don't really know why. I think I'd have to be like a really smart political analyst, strategist, and I don't know. You can read about it. It's kind of interesting, but people don't even really know how or why this happened. But they did. They swapped. Because look, think about who you know is a Republican today. Well, Trump obviously is the president, but think about like the stereotypical Republican. Okay? But Republicans were formed in opposition to slavery. And think about today, like when we see on the next PowerPoint, when we go through the stereotypes and stuff, most African Americans are not Republicans. Yet I would beg to say that most African Americans in 1854 were against slavery. So they have flip-flopped, right? And so Democrats, they're not just kind of your like, just country common person anymore. If anything, I would say that tends to be more Republican, and they've switched. Don't know what happened, but the parties about 100 years ago, like how they started out with their values and goals, have switched. And like the Republicans of today are not like the people they started. I mean, these are the people that when Abraham Lincoln gets elected for president, I mean, this is when the Civil War begins. And now the people in the South, who you would think would have been the people on that side of the Civil War, they're actually the Republican side. Mind blowing. So like you see right here, you didn't have to write down, they actually switched sides. There's some other political parties that have gone on through our history in this chart right here. Probably heard of them before. And then there's something called third parties. So we have two main parties. Another party can enter. They're called, you guessed it, the third party, because they're the third wheel. These are smaller parties, and they usually have like a particular philosophy, idea, candidate. Third parties have never won the office of presidency, but they've influenced politics because they promoted ideas that were first unpopular. Now, here's an interesting fact for you guys. I don't even know if you guys know this. Bernie Sanders is not a registered Democrat. He is an independent. He has been an independent, a senator. I think it's the state of Vermont. It's Vermont. He has been a senator for like 30 years or more from Vermont, and he is an independent. He's not a Republican, and he's not a Democrat. Now, if he had to pick one of the two, who does he sound most like? He sounds a lot more Democrat than he does Republican. So when he decided to run for president, he knew it was political suicide to run as an independent. There's no way he would win. No one's ever won. No one's ever even gotten enough people. No one's ever even went to a state and had more people in that state vote for them than the other two guys and won that state's electoral college, like won their electoral votes. An independent, a third party, has never had one electoral vote, ever, out of all 270 every single year, or out of all 538 every single 4 years. So he knew if he wanted to run for president, there's no way he could run as an independent. So he sided with the Democrat. So just a nice little interesting fact to make sure you know everything before you go vote and stuff, that if you're voting and you're truly a Democrat, he's actually not really one. He's a third party. But it's pretty smart. You can't blame the guy. I'd probably do it if I were him too, because there's no chance of winning the presidency if you're not. Here's some examples of some third parties we have. I always start with these because they're pretty like exciting. The socialist and the communist, and you're sitting here like, what? We don't have socialists, we don't have communists. We do. And you can join the Socialist Party of America, the Socialist Labor Party, or the Communist Party of America. You could choose to join them when you register to vote, and you give your money to them. You go to their website, you go to their rallies, go to their speeches, stuff like that. Now, they're never going to get enough momentum to do anything, mainly because if you think about Americans' views toward like communism and stuff like that. But they're out there. Libertarian, you've probably heard about. They made a pretty good showing in the last election. They tend to do better with the younger crowd because, like, money-wise, they're like a Republican and they're fiscally conservative. But like social issue-wise, they're like a Democrat and they're pretty liberal. So it's like, I want to take care of my money. I don't want to do crazy stuff with my money, but I'll also give people rights, immigration, same-sex marriage, stuff like that. And so it's kind of interesting. And they have really started to make some ground with younger people because one of their other main platforms is the legalization of marijuana. And so that's one of their main things right now. Then you can also just be an independent candidate, which is what Bernie Sanders could do. Ross Perot did it in 1992 and 1996. He had a great showing, had millions of people vote for him, but didn't have a state where he won more. And so this was when Clinton and the first Bush were running. And so what happens when you have a third party is this, okay? America's divided about 50-50, 50%, 50% at any given time. At any given time, there's more Democrats or more Republicans, you know, we shift. But think about it. I mean, you could go back over, you go back about 40 years or so, and only one time have we went to the same party. So like Trump is a Republican, but before him was Obama, who was a Democrat. Before him was Bush, who was a Republican. And before him was Clinton, who was a Democrat. Before him was Bush, who was a Republican. And before Bush was Reagan, who was a Republican. That's about the only time in 40 years you see us go same party, same party. I mean, we flip-flop, you know? And so usually we do Democrat and then we do Republican, Democrat, and then people get tired of the Democrat ideology and they go Republican, and people get tired of the Republican. And, you know, we're all moderate, like that stuff Miss Bailey taught you, where a lot of us are in the middle. So what happens when you have an independent candidate is this. America's always about 50-50. Well, that independent candidate's going to sound more like this guy or more like this guy. There's no way not to. You see what I'm saying? They're going to sound more Republican or more Democrat. You can't sound like something else because this is the whole 50-50. You're going to be one of them. So Ross Perot sounded a whole lot more like a Republican. So take this half, right? 50%. This half of people, some of them vote for Ross Perot and some of them vote for George Bush. Well, you don't have to be a mathematician to understand that if you got a whole group over here voting for Clinton and half vote for Bush and half vote for Perot, Ross Perot, two of these little ones never going to beat a whole one together. So what independents usually do is they end up splitting one of the major parties, and they actually end up shooting themselves in the foot because the party that they're the most like doesn't win because they took votes away from that party. So like another good example is back in 1912, you have Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt did 2 terms as a president. Everyone loved him. He said, I'm not going to do more than 2 terms. Washington only did 2 terms. Every president up until that point only did 2 terms. He said, I'm not going to do 2 terms. So here, vote for my best friend, William Taft, and William Howard Taft. And so he introduces his best friend. He wins. Well, when that Taft got in, he did everything opposite of Roosevelt. Roosevelt's just like over to the side, like, oh my gosh, like cringy, like, why did I do this? So Roosevelt decides to run again. Well, he can't run again because Taft is the incumbent. He's going to automatically get that party's nomination, just like Trump automatically get the Republican nomination in the next election. So what ends up happening is Teddy Roosevelt makes up his own party, calls it the Bull Moose Party. So you've got the Republicans, which would have been what he was in Taft, and you got the Democrats, which is Woodrow Wilson. And so what ends up happening is a lot of people who were Republicans vote for Teddy Roosevelt, and then the rest of the Republicans vote for Taft. But half and half can't beat a whole. And all the Democrats vote for Wilson, and Wilson wins. And that's pretty much what happened in 1992. All the Democrats voted for Bill Clinton. Half voted for Perot, half voted for Bush. 2 halves are not going to beat a whole. So an independent candidate usually just ends up splitting and making the people he's most like lose, makes himself lose and the people that would have been most like him lose, which is probably why Bernie Sanders decided to run as a Democrat, because he didn't want to do that to the Democratic Party. There's a list of political candidates. Like I said, Ross Perot, this is not 19,000. This is actually in thousands. So this is 19 million. So he had 19 million people vote for him. In 1992, that was pretty big. As you can see, he's the third party candidate who's had the best showing ever. Now, most other places in the world are not 2-party systems. Most of them are multi-party systems. You know, multi means a lot. So many political parties, and one party rarely wins enough to completely control. So most places in Europe, you know, like Israel, you got on the map here, but like England, Germany, France, they have a lot of different parties. And so like one party might be the president, or as they say, chancellor, prime minister, whatever they call it. And one might be in charge of their Congress or parliament, and one might be, you know, in charge of this house, and a different one's in charge of that house, and a different one's president, and a different one's your governor. And it's like everyone gets their voice in some way. It's not going to be all, like here in America, you can have like all Republican or all Democrat. And that's definitely happened where you have the president and Congress, both houses, the House and the Senate, your governor, bam. It only takes a couple of people and the whole government's either all Democrat or all Republican. These countries, that never happens. I mean, you can see right here how many different political parties there are in Israel. So many countries have this. Germany has over 5 very strong political parties. I think the United Kingdom has around 6 or 7. Israel has over 20. And so you're always, now your party might not win because there's a lot more of you, but so you have less of a chance than just 50-50 shot. But then it's more like spread out. A lot of people say that if we had more parties in America, we wouldn't be so divisive because it's either this or that. You're right or you're wrong. And if we had more in the gray, in the middle, that were kind of a mixture of the two, like they're this, then maybe people would get along better. Then you can also have something called a one-party system. So one-party system is the political party and the government are the same. So this is like China, a lot of communist countries, although China's not really communist anymore. Communist countries have this. China has this. Other countries where you can go vote, but like the Communist Party is like the only party you get to pick people from. So you can kind of decide if it's worth it or not. So then you do the political party survey. That is the political spectrum survey. You did it with Miss Fadley in class, I remember. And then this is kind of what we came up with. So here is a scale. So you have a line at the bottom of your notes. You need to know that Democrats are liberal and they're on the left. They're always on the left side. L and L, left and liberal. You need to know that Republicans are conservative and they're always on the right. R and R, Republicans and right. If someone was extreme left, like way off the screen, like sitting way over there in your bedroom or your living room or wherever you're watching this, they would be a communist or a socialist. And if someone was extreme right, like way off the screen on the other side in your kitchen or down the hallway, they would be a Nazi or a fascist. Yeah, Nazism or fascism. I can never say that word. It's crazy. Most people, though, are pretty much moderate. You probably remember when you took your political survey, you had some Democrat, some Republican, and that makes you moderate. And so what happens is they have to come into the middle. They have to come into the middle to get votes. If they stay too far hardcore Republican, hardcore Democrat, they're going to alienate a lot of people because all the people are in the middle. So they got to come in. They got to come in and not be too hard on their beliefs and too out there in left field and too crazy with their stuff. And that's how they get everybody. And the last thing to remember, and this is going to take us into the next notes where we go about Democrats versus Republican, is the biggest thing between them. The basic difference between them is size of government. I want you to think about it like this. You'll probably hear me say this in the next PowerPoint too. Democrats want the federal government to be more involved with our lives. Republicans want the federal government to be less involved with our lives. Take that back to the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. Remember, the Federalists wanted more government. And Thomas Jefferson, those anti-federalists who became the Democratic Republicans, they were distrusting of government. They wanted less. So I want you to think about these words. Democrats are liberal, Republicans are conservative. All right, now you probably never talk like this. It'd be kind of weird, but you could. So liberal is a fancy word for a lot. Like if you were making me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich right now, and you're like, all right, Ms. Parnell, how much peanut butter do you want? Because people like different amounts. Some people like it stick to the roof of their mouth. Some people just like a little bit. And you're like, all right, Ms. Parnell, how much peanut butter do you want? And I said, oh man, put a liberal amount on there. That's me telling you, put a lot. Like smack that peanut butter. I want it kind of like coming out the sides, a lot. So Democrats are liberal. They want a lot. And what they mean is a lot of government. So think of some Democratic measures, right? Think of healthcare, Obamacare. Obama was a Democrat. He got healthcare passed. And so that was called Obamacare. When the government took on healthcare, it got big. It got, a lot more in your life. I mean, think of all the people, well, now with the coronavirus and all this, absolutely. But just normally, think of all the people that go to the doctor, have surgeries, get sick, take medicine, yada, 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 yada. Millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people across the country. So when the government took on that responsibility, the government just got way bigger. It got way more involved in your life, okay? Republicans are conservative. Conservative is a fancy word for a little. Okay, so right now, if I told you you have to conserve electricity, that means turn the lights off, don't be running all the electronics, let's use a little amount of electricity. Oh, I got a good one. Coronavirus. You need to conserve your toilet paper. So you don't need to be liberally using your toilet paper, making these big old wands. That would be liberal. That'd mean a lot. So if I told you need to conserve your toilet paper, yeah, I'll give you more than a square. That wouldn't be enough. That'd be weird. So if you needed to conserve your toilet paper, you would need to be using a little bit of toilet paper. So conservatives want a little bit of government in their life. And basically it's the idea of don't be telling me what to do. Don't be running my life. Let me make my decisions. I don't want you all up in here. And so to them, the reason they didn't like healthcare so much is because that they knew that was government getting bigger, and they want government to be smaller. If I want to get your healthcare, I'll get it. If I don't, I won't. I'm gonna get sick. That's how I'll do it. And so that's the major difference. So if you can remember that Democrats want a lot of government, and that's why, like, you think of some of their programs they're talking about, like, free college, right? Think of everyone that goes to college. It's a lot of people. It's a lot of money. That's a lot of years of your life. It's just this large thing. And if they take on free college, government will be that much larger, that much more liberal, that much more in your life. And think about like social rights, like when they're talking about liberal, like it's kind of like they have a lot of it. So like they'll give it out to everyone, like you get a marriage and you get a marriage. That's my little joke in that. Whereas conservatives tend to be more, and it's not like it's not then bad. It's just more of the like the let me pick how I'm going to do it. Let me choose. Let me run my life. Let me do it. And so government needs to stay smaller and stay out of it. So if you can remember the difference between those two, you'll be set for the rest of the unit. And that's pretty much it. All right. Thank you, guys.